From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holiday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Fellow conspiracy realists, we took a brief break last week and we are back at it. So much stuff has happened. There's so much news out there. Dare we say some of it is strange. We're going to learn about a real global conspiracy based in the Middle East. We're going to talk a little bit about maybe freedom of expression is a good way to put it, Noel. And we do want to give you a warning at the very top. Okay, there is an important story that we're going to get to toward the end of this week's segment, and it is not for everyone. It contains some very graphic information. We've got your back. We're going to give you a heads up before we get to it. We'll make it clear so you'll know going in. But before we do any of that, Noel, I hear Disney's been on your mind lately.
When is it not, man? It's the most magical place on earth. And I have to say, I hadn't been to Disney World or Land since I was a very small child. And I think I mentioned on the show recently that earlier this year, my family and some close friends and I went to Disney World in Florida. And it was just awesome. I mean, I get what all the fuss is about. It's a really cool place. Like, they even make waiting in line seem kind of fun. And, you know, since we're talking about that, before I get into today's story, which is admittedly a little bit of a shorty, I did want to mention another line-related Disney story that I heard recently, that apparently those lines that I said are fun to wait in because there's lots of stuff to look at. I'll tell you what there aren't on those lines is places to use the bathroom. And we did successfully, we had two young kids with us. We were successfully able to get a cast member, as they're known in Disney parlance, to guide them and the parent to a nearby facility through some back corridors. But apparently a lot of people, parents, don't have the foresight to do that and just have their kids poop on the ground. Mm-hmm. This is a thing.
Yeah, there's also, this is weird too. I'm glad you brought this up because some people may be unaware that in different parts of the world, it is totally normalized to just have your kids defecate or pee in the street or on the side of the road. What I'm saying is, have you ever been to a place where you're using a public restroom and there's a sign with someone squatting on top of the toilet and they're like, don't do that. It's
Ben, I love that you took this issue and made it global. I do appreciate that. But I have to say, I don't think there's any world where it's okay to poop in line with other people in a ride situation.
I'm telling you, man, I agree with you. I have your back here. Like we should. Order must prevail, right? We should poop in the assigned areas, I think is a good call.
And one of the more popular, probably because it's one of the longest lines, and we waited in this one, and it was kind of worth the wait. There's an Avatar ride. There's two Avatar rides. One's like a jungle cruise kind of like boat type ride. We didn't do that one, but we did do the flight one. I forget what it's called, something flight, where you ride this virtual reality thing, and you're like flying with the Na'vi on their whatever shrieky banshee, pterodactyl things. But there is a cove, like a little like alley almost to the side of one of the lines that apparently there's like a Reddit, as there is for everything, for Disney employees, and they refer to it as like the poop alley. Because apparently people will just duck into it and have their kids just poop on the floor. But that's not what we're talking about today.
I'm just saying, for some tourist from China.
No, that's absolutely true.
There has been a stereotype.
It's a very good point, Ben, and I don't think I didn't clock that as any of the references. I would, in my mind, more than that, I would just picture like kind of entitled Buckhead Betty type moms, sort of like wine moms who don't really care about others, just doing that. That's kind of the way I look at it. But you're right, Ben, there is definitely a And Buckhead Betty, by the way, is sort of a local thing here in Atlanta. Basically a Karen type situation, but Buckhead is a sort of a more affluent, bougie community here in Atlanta. And oftentimes when folks from that part of town venture, inward to the city, they're a little demanding. They're the kind of people that'll snap at you at a restaurant, snap with their fingers, to beckon you come hither.
Garçon, and they know it means boy.
Garçon means boy, exactly. Well, speaking of boys, there was a boy, man, dare we say, it was a segue of sorts. A 26-year-old, in fact, who has remained unnamed. And I saw this for the first time, I think as it was kind of making the rounds from people uploading it off of their, to TikTok and stuff. And again, I'm not a TikToker, so I see things maybe a little later on Instagram when like an adult. But there's this video of these people in one of the gondolas it's a Small World ride at Disney in Anaheim, Disney World, right? No, Land. That's Disneyland in Anaheim. And there's this very kind of gaunt looking shirtless and pantsless young dude just wandering the set, like where there's all the little figures and stuff and the backgrounds and things flying around, and like he is just wandering around. And I actually put a link in our chat here. Yeah. My share isn't working. Would one of you guys mind playing it real quick so we can listen to the audio? Because the audio alone is kind of amazing. While this is happening, this kid is just wandering around, just kind of like peering around behind stuff, and there's this pool that looks like it's water, but it's actually fabric that's kind of billowing. And all the while, these Disney adults, which are adult people who love Disney, nothing wrong with that, but there is a bit of a cultish quality around some of these folks. And again, I'm not no aspersions there, but they're just looking on in terror. And the literal loudest voice in the room, I want you guys to hear, because this person is absolutely having zero impact on what this kid is doing.
Oh my God. Oh God, he's gonna break all the stuff. I don't think so.
He's got great abs.
Really good abs, real lanky fellow. So this person is literally just shouting, sit down. I don't know if it's a patron or an employee. You're going to hurt yourself. And then someone says, he's going to break all the stuff, which is my favorite. And then someone very kind of like very California way kind of says, they should turn off the music. Which is, I think, my favorite detail as well.
The music is what makes it so entertaining for me.
Yeah.
I think.
And it's funny, too, because, typically in It's a Small World ride, most people's complaint about that ride is the song, because it just plays on a loop ad nauseum. Just, but it would appear that they've zhuzhed it up for the holidays. And this version of the song is not the traditional It's a Small World. It's more of a Christmas themed version, because we're hearing jingle bells. And I think it is literally more like a jingle bell type melody. So what happened was this, at this point in the I guess this person's experience, they're wearing shorts. It looks to be like boxer briefs or something. But there's another video you can find a couple of videos where this kid is seen emerging from the gondola tunnel, the exit, which is water, right? And he's naked at this point, fully naked. And he's just kind of trudging out, just looking around like that meme of John Travolta in Pulp Fiction, just kind of looking just like, what is going on here? Looking at things very meticulously and bewilderedly simultaneously, which is, to me, the hallmark of someone on a heavy dose of hallucinogens, which seems like he doesn't seem terrified, which you'd think would be certainly on the table. People seem to have an aversion to It's a Small World, stone cold sober. But he's walking out. At this point, he's shed his entire clothes. And there's also part of the other video, you see where he dropped all of his clothes in a pile, including his shoes. Right. And then he breaks out of the gondola and goes, and he's just wandering.
What time of day was this?
It was 1:30 p.m. In the afternoon, broad daylight. And it apparently only caused the ride to shut down for a couple hours. It was reopened around 3 o'clock. But the best part is, maybe not the best part, it's kind of awful, is there's another video where you can see this kid being carried out by police and security still fully nude, and like they've got him in this like spread eagle kind of position and just kind of lazily draped a blanket over him, but even in the video it still had blur lines on it, so presumably that wasn't quite doing the trick. And you hear someone go, "Idiot," with all these kids around, and that's accurate. This is an act of sexual assault in a way. I mean, it's certainly indecent exposure, which is what he got charged with by the police there in Anaheim. In addition to, I think, criminal mischief maybe was one of them. I love that one. That's always
that's a great name.
Fun sounding one. Yeah. And then also being under the influence of a controlled substance.
And I love that you point out how quickly the ride got back up to speed. It reminds me, we need to shout out our pal codename Doc Holliday's episode on Disney with, who was that? Was that Lauren co-hosting on that one? Yeah, Lauren Vogelbaum. Yeah. I mean, it's insane though, because, okay, Noel, I have a question for you. How often does stuff like this happen, do you think?
More often than you'd think. I mean, I mentioned the pooping stuff, and we definitely done in the past also, like all these weird stories about like, you can't die at Disney, stuff like that. Like if so they'll some of the things that we debunked. We also know that there was a rash of people taking their recently departed loved ones' ashes and throwing them off Disney rides, and that's a big no-no, and that will would cause the ride to shut down, because that's of course a biohazard if they're not your loved ones. Keith Richards snorted his father, apparently. But there are other instances like this. In fact, in People magazine, they mentioned another incident that happened very, very recently. In fact, where someone tried to dive off of the edge of like a kind of a observation deck in order to satisfy allegedly a $60,000 bet. There's something, the World Showcase Lagoon, which I believe in Epcot is the kind of the big body of water between all of the different sort of like recreations of different countries. There's like a big old body of water, kind of a moat situation. And it says, a guy dove in feet first and swam to the side, climbed over a gondola, and then got out. And in the TikTok video, you hear someone, which is probably going to be the case for this other streaker fellow, "You're going to get banned for life, homie. You're getting banned for life," because that is very much a thing at Disney, banning for life, and they do not play.
I hope it was a cast member in a costume. I hope it was someone dressed as Goofy who was like, "You're going to get banned for life, homie."
It's funny that you mentioned that, Ben. In the video of the authorities dragging him out, which also I didn't quite get to the bottom of this yet, and I'm sure more information will come out, because we know there are like backstage areas, where like cast members go to whatever, have a lunch break or whatever it might be, and that they make a huge deal about you can never take your head off if you're a costumed cast member. You have to go backstage for that. And apparently the backstage area is a lot like the backstage of a theater, where it's like the bones of everything. You know what I mean? It's not like necessarily decked out like everything. They reserve all that for the guests. But in the video where they're for whatever reason, they couldn't find a way to take him out the back. So they're literally marching him through with people watching, like tons of people watching. And there's this dude wearing like an elf costume, talking into his sleeve, who was very clearly like a hidden security guy.
He's like the air marshal on the plane.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, dude. And I'm sure they've got those posted all over, because like to the previous thing I was saying about the pooping in line, that stuff gets scooped up lickety split or lickety. That's gross. Sorry.
Worth it.
Like people come, they find it. They've got, I don't know what kind of. They don't want us to know.
Cameras. They have cameras literally everywhere.
But they probably also have like, infrared or something that like can detect warm human feces, I would imagine.
I think they just see it the moment that your little toddler squats down and dukes.
It has to be the level of surveillance and probably proprietary. Like they've everything they do there is like a trade secret, right? That you would have at casinos, where they can tell if the dealer is cheating instantly because there's like a flag. You don't even have to have a human. There's probably a kid pooping in line detector, built into these things, or a streaker on the ride detector. It wouldn't take long to catch this guy. He stuck out like a sore thumb. But what a story!
Can I guys just say something? Okay, I get this person, this human, for taking these actions. I get this person getting in trouble for breaking.
You relate to this person doing these things?
I understand this person getting in trouble for
Yes.
breaking park rules, right?
Yes.
Potentially causing harm to company property or even maybe trespassing in this instance. But is it weird to you guys that we can get in trouble for just walking around as the animals we are without coverings?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a very interesting point, Matt. And it's interesting that it's still such a bone of contention. And it's like, what is oh God, now I'm going to sound like an apologist for like flashers or something. But
No,
like,
don't mean flashing. It's just like
you started down this rabbit hole. No, I do think it's interesting, and I think it's in a lot of ways very silly and prudish. But it is what you would, I guess, can call a societal norm or moray, and we've built structures around these things, and that's why even in like a lot of European cities, like having a nude beach or having I think in Germany being fully topless is okay, you know,
Yes.
and the fact that it's applied differently to men versus women, you know, that women are not allowed to show their breasts, but like men can be shirtless, drinking Diet Cokes with their glistening abdominals, you know, on roofs. Sorry, I'm making myself feel away.
Perplept. You're absolutely right. I agree. It's a social contract, right? So the idea is one of informed consent in a community, even if that community is temporary and artificial one, such as Disneyland. Like, to your point, Matt, obviously, yes, clothing is a human invention and it's not part of the natural hardware, but
an optional human invention. Hey, come on, guys.
Hey, guys, loosen up. But also, you know, another way, I think, another aspect to explore there would be the concept of being non-consensually sent a dick pic.
That's right.
You didn't agree to it, so why should you, not consenting, be subjected to it? That's why that person, or the secret elf op of Disneyland, or whomever, is saying, "Oh, there are kids here." If you knew there was going to be a naked guy when you came in, that's one thing.
Sure.
If you didn't, that's a different thing. And
but everybody in that ride is naked under their clothes. I don't know. It's just
Matt,
weirding me out.
You're very interesting today.
I think I took shrooms before this episode.
Hell
And
yeah,
I'm
you
feeling
did.
like this guy, like one with everyone. The way that ride makes you feel one with everyone.
Let me just quid pro quo Clarice you here real quick. That's not really right, but it works for my purposes. Like, let's say, you know, your kid went on a field trip with their school to an art museum and saw nude sculptures, and you didn't know because you've never been to an art museum before that was going to happen. I think there would understandably be some rightful indignation there, and probably the school could get in trouble, and they probably would need to be very careful about stuff like that.
Yeah, probably. Everybody's different, but we're all the same. But
penises are objectively weird looking. I mean, even the best of them. Anyway. You guys have anything else on that one? What do you think is going to happen? Banned for life for sure. I mean, you know, honestly, yeah, this is like basically the equivalent of exposing yourself to a minor. So it's not going to go well for this guy. Ben, what do you think?
I think criminal mischief is a great name for a crime. That's my primary takeaway.
You think he's going to be a sex offender? You think he'll end up on a sex crime
you are
list?
exposing yourself to children, right?
Yeah.
But the question then is, do you know conclusively whether this was a substance? He was definitely under control. It wasn't like a mental break.
Man. He's basically meditating in the middle. Like, it looks like he's about to rise up off the damn ground. I mean, there's something going on with this guy. You know, as someone who's been around completely as a neutral observer, people taking psychedelics, this guy was absolutely on something, as they say.
Be safe out there.
Yeah, indeed. But also Disney World, Disneyland, awesome. Excited to go back. I'd wait in those lines. You know, I would have waited another 45 minutes. Just bring a jug of some kind. That's all I'm saying. Be discreet, y'all. We're going to take a break. Matt's making a face. We'll be back after a word from our sponsor.
And we've returned, and we are turning our eyes to oil, guys. I don't know why I did it like that. We're going to be reading from an article written by Damian Carrington for The Guardian on November 27th, 2023. The title is Revealed: Saudi Arabia's Grand Plan to, quote, hook poor countries on oil. And we're just going to read parts of this and we'll break out and talk about sections. Okay, guys, here we go. Saudi Arabia is driving a huge global investment plan to create demand, that's really important, for its oil and gas in developing countries, an undercover investigation has revealed. So, first off the bat, you guys, let's discuss Saudi Arabia. This place, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, or KSA, has been a major player in the oil business since the late 1930s. 1938 is when there's literally an American oil refinery that basically strikes oil and realize, oh my gosh, there's so much underneath this land. We can make a lot of money. And they've been successful in making mountains of money, pulling it from the earth for decades, pretty much because they get cozy relationships with these traditionally very powerful, very advanced nations such as the United States. And they've been exporting oil to countries like the U.S. for decades, and everybody's been happy. But as the demand for oil is starting to weaken, because these same highly developed countries are moving towards more sustainable, environmentally friendly forms of energy, they don't want as much oil. So the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is basically saying, okay, we need to find more customers. At least that's what I'm getting from this. Would you guys agree?
Yes,
Okay.
100%.
Do you think there's concern that the tide is being sort of rolled back in favor of renewables, and that folks are going to be like, we got to figure out maybe some new revenue streams for this stuff? I know that's not like now, but it does feel like maybe down the line, if that's your main thing, then there are people having to think down the line, right?
Yeah, especially when it comes to using oil as a combustible to run machinery, right? That becomes a big thing. And also using oil and gas to run power plants, to be one of the primary energy sources for an area. So let's keep going down here, because I think we're going to hit some of these things, guys. If you go to the website for this thing, it's called the OST, or the Oil Sustainability Program. At least that's what it's called on the English language version of the website that I can access and understand, right?
And sometimes called, what is it, ODSP, which is basically the same thing.
Well, no, it's not the same thing at all. It's ODST is the Oil Demand Sustainability Program, which means they're trying to make sure the demand is there somewhere, right? And they call it that on the Arabic version of the website, which is really interesting, right? It's either the Oil Sustainability Program or the Oil Demand Sustainability Program. Changes the meaning quite a bit, I think.
So are they, clear this up for me, Matt, please, I'm confused. So are they the same program with different names, or are they two separate entities
Are
with
there
similar
shared
names?
bodies of board members, or what? Are these two completely different organizations?
It's like if Sony called itself the Sony Company or Sony Company, but on different websites.
So it is the same thing.
It's the same exact thing. It's
Same
just
thing with two different names.
Okay, got it.
And, you know, it could be something that's lost in translation, right? Going from Arabic to English, but I don't think it is. And the reason why I don't think it is because there was this undercover investigation where journalists pretended to be people who were interested in this program. So they basically got the entire pitch from the Saudi government and officials there. And that's why this is even a story, because the way they talk about it to people who might be interested in the program versus the way they sell the program to the public, it's just so very vastly different. And let's get this out of the way. This program is overseen by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and it involves the biggest oil companies in Saudi Arabia. And Aramco is a name that you might remember. These are the big players in oil. And I guess that means in a way they're conspiring to do this stuff, because they are, you know, like I said, they are giving a different public story than they are behind closed doors. Let's get into what they're saying. The reporters asked the people giving this presentation whether it was their aim to, quote, artificially stimulate demand in key markets. And they responded, quote, yes, it's one of the main objectives we're trying to accomplish. We don't believe it's possible that developing countries can skip the fossil fuel phase, because in order to implement electric vehicles, you'll need a ready infrastructure. I want to pause here and ask you guys about what you think of that. Do you think you have to go through the development phases of what you would need to have to run gas-powered cars before you can run electric-powered cars?
The leapfrog technology theory, right?
Yeah. Do you? What do you? Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm asking you guys. What do you think?
I guess I reiterate I posit my previous question as sort of like, this is a business move. This is like a 3-dimensional chess move, right? Like to figure out what the next phase of this legacy product is that you're so invested in. So I don't quite understand the question. Like, isn't the infrastructure already there?
No.
Like what's different about this than just traditional old selling petroleum?
Well, because what Saudi Arabia wants to do is invest in, let's say, Rwanda, and they want to build a bunch of roads, right? The way the U.S. built a bunch of roads. They need
petroleum to, like, literally, let's move the gasoline guzzling vehicles to these other countries that don't have the infrastructure yet, right?
Yes, according to the Saudi Arabian officials, roughly 3% of people who live on the African continent own a vehicle. So they want to make that number skyrocket. And in order to, have a vehicle, the type of vehicle that they want to sell and they think they can sell to people living in Africa are like a very affordable small vehicle that they want to work with manufacturers to create and then sell in whatever country that they're partnering with. In this case, again, Rwanda and a handful of others. Let me jump back to the article here. It says the projects are in 3 categories: transport, utilities, and materials, with the third promoting the replacement of some cement, steel, and wood used in construction with oil-derived plastics. So again, they want oil demand, right? So it's not just a car that runs on oil. It's also a power plant that runs on oil. It's also oil to be used in the manufacturing of plastics for things like construction. It's basically like...
Yeah, I get it.
They're saying to African countries, as you are developing, develop all of our
direction,
oil,
please.
And we'll give you a sweet deal, but you got to get hooked on our oil and
it's
only
like
our
drug
oil.
Pusher mentality, dude.
Bro, that is exactly a quote.
That's what it is. It's getting them addicted.
No, exactly. From Mohammed Adaw. He's the director of a think tank called Power Shift Africa, and this is his quote: "The Saudi government is like a drug dealer trying to get Africa hooked on its harmful product. The rest of the world is weaning itself off dirty and polluting fossil fuels, and Saudi Arabia is getting desperate for more customers and is turning its sights on Africa." I mean, that's the way it feels to me. But again, if you're a developing country, can you leapfrog those other technologies before you just all of a sudden have electric vehicles, all of a sudden have sustainable energy?
We want nice things too. We want cars. We want to be able to do all these things the rest of the world's been doing for however long. And you're saying because of pollution, we're not able to do that. From their perspective, I would argue that would be like, that's bullshit. We get to do, you guys have been doing this for years.
But it's weird because there is brand new technology that could leapfrog.
It's expensive though. Isn't it more expensive?
It is more expensive, but I'm not somebody who can make policy decisions or understand or where money would actually flow to make this happen. But it does seem as though you wouldn't have to do that. The example I have in my head has to do with communications technology. And I imagine living in a neighborhood where in 2023, my neighborhood still has telegraphs, and that's all we've got because we haven't done as well as the neighbors around us, right? Like the other neighborhoods. The other neighborhoods
who have fiber optic, who have fiber internet, a couple streets over. Yeah.
But they incrementally over decades and decades installed all the infrastructure they needed to have telephone wires and to have DSL cables and cable from the cable company and, fiber optics running through their streets and all that stuff. They incrementally got to the point where they are. But if all of a sudden my neighborhood has the means to upgrade, do we have to go through all that other crap?
Well,
right?
I think that's a great example to interject. We've talked about this previously, like the leapfrog technology argument is valid and it's powerful. And I love what you're bringing up, Noel, the perspective of other countries. So the Industrial Revolution, especially as it metastasized, we could say, it was able to get to these extremes of fossil fuel pollution and climate degradation. It was able to do that by outsourcing a lot of the problems, a lot of the waste to these other countries who are now saying, in so many international climate conversations, they're saying, well, how come you're changing the rules of the game when it's our turn at bat? You know what I mean? Why can't
like carbon offset stuff?
Right.
Like
Why can't we enjoy the advantages that you had when you were outsourcing the consequences to us for generations? And to your point, Matt, about the idea, yes, the technology exists. Is it expensive? Sure. But isn't the global economy kind of an ideological argument to begin with? And what about, if we practice current economy, what about economy of scale? These kinds of solutions like electric vehicles, desalination, they become increasingly affordable the more widespread they are. And with Saudi Arabia, with this plan, which I do, I mean, it's nomenclature again. It's like the hypnosis conversation, right? What words do we choose? Is it a conspiracy or merely an economic decision on behalf of a state actor? Like the reality is that there are things that would be better on the African continent with, how did they say it? They said something really slick in that article you shared by Carrington. They said we're removing barriers, right? A lot of people are using wood-fired stoves, and that's terrible for the inside of your house. That's not great for forests, which are already under threat. I mean, I see that there's an argument there, but also, yeah, they definitely have an ulterior motive. Wasn't there that quote, years and years back, about the discovery of petroleum and the growth of petro-based empires, where some guy said, look, yeah, I'm going to drive a Mercedes. My kid's going to drive a Mercedes, but my grandson is going to ride a pack animal. If we remain reliant
on Mars,
if we remain reliant on fossil fuels, which are not an infinitely sustainable approach to life.
Yeah. The real heinous thing for me about all of this is because one of the primary criteria for this project to take on a contract with another country, again, they've got several I keep talking about. Rwanda, Nigeria is another country they're working with, and Ethiopia. But one of the things that you have to have as a country to get into this program is a, quote, incremental demand potential, which means they're going to see a ton of growth as you get more and more of these petroleum products and, again, energy infrastructure plugged in to your whole grid.
Nigeria makes sense, of course. It's Nigeria is experiencing explosive population and economic growth. That's like you couldn't pick a better candidate, honestly.
Well, sure, but it's again, it is getting your hooks in as early as you can and making sure they're deep. Whatever. Who am I? Who are we to talk about this stuff? It's just it seems wrong, I guess, in some way, but at the same time, I don't know. It feels like a gray area to me.
It's predatory. Is it not a geopolitical version of grooming?
Yeah, but it is. I think you're right, but it's what every large international company does. They get their hooks in you, right? I mean, with phones, with any tech.
Does that make it right, though?
No, it's not right. It's not right.
The only way around it is for another giant corporation, let's just say a Tesla or something, to just give free Teslas to like everybody over there and install. Like, it's never going to happen. It's just not going to happen. There's no humanitarian effort that would be that large and just purely benevolent. It's just too expensive. I don't think it would ever happen.
Yeah.
And I'm only saying Tesla because they make electric cars. I know Elon wouldn't do anything like that. He's too greedy. I mean, I think. I think.
Well, that would be insane. Giving away a bunch of really expensive vehicles, right? I mean,
I'm just saying, what's the alternative? You'd have to, again, give them an incentive. You'd have to set up a system where it made sense or help build that infrastructure and make the cars more affordable, but they're barely able to get that technology sold to folks over here and make it stick over here. You know what I mean? It's taken ages. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be doom and gloom about it. I just don't see this is a business opportunity and nothing more. And that's how it's being treated. But yeah, it is super sketchy and gross.
You mentioned 3D chess. And of course, let's get in front of the email. Yes, all chess is 3D. you mentioned this chess game, and I think you're right, Noel, because let's consider also that currently the government of China is the leader in the world of electric vehicle manufacturing. So if you are playing these reindeer games, and if you are Prince bin Salman, then you are looking at how to guarantee continuity and power and hegemony for your place, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is still very much oil reliant. You have to wonder what the government of China is thinking about these moves. And you got to wonder what kind of conversations those guys are having in the back rooms.
Yeah, right. According to Adao, the only way this gets fixed is if rich nations, as we said, that already went through all these processes, that are now trying to be climate neutral and striving so hard to do that, to invest large sums of money so that individual nations within Africa can leapfrog. But it would take a lot of
That's what
money.
I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, obviously the give everyone a Tesla thing is absurd, but that's what I was inching towards.
Agreed.
And that's the only way. And I just don't see it happening. And yet, we as a country give or invest in other countries if we want to participate in a coup or help out if it'll enrich us, but we don't really care about people's quality of life or the frickin' planet. Let's just be honest.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about this, everybody, head on over to moenergy.gov.sa. All right, we'll be right back with more strange news.
And we have returned. At the top of this week's Strange News segment, we gave a disclaimer, hopefully a strong disclaimer. We're going to reiterate it now. The following story that you are about to hear is not appropriate for all audiences. It does contain incredibly disturbing, at times profoundly graphic descriptions of crimes that I am going to argue connect to a larger pattern. I'm not sure whether you could quite call it a conspiracy, but it is a problem that will continue. There's a guy named David Fuller. I want to go to a Guardian article by Kevin Rawlinson, along with the help from the Guardian staff. This person, this monster, is a murderer, is a necrophiliac, and for more than a decade, for like 15 years, he got away with desecrating human bodies from 2015 to 2020 without ever being caught. And this happened in the United Kingdom. He is currently considered to be the worst necrophiliac killer in British history. He abused the cadavers of more than 100 women and female children because the hospital where he worked, or the series of hospitals where he worked as an electrician, just never bothered to check on him, to that earlier point about the, at times, necessity of security cameras in places like Disneyland. This came out, right? This might sound like old beans to some folks, but this investigation that just came out, just got published, happens while this guy is already behind bars. He got what's called a whole life order, which in the United Kingdom means you go to jail and no matter what, you're going to die in jail. Even though they're not practicing the death penalty, they're removing you because you are a danger to society. The inquiry, led by a guy named Sir Jonathan Michael, said that over the years, again, over a decade, there were multiple missed opportunities to not even investigate, to just acknowledge the evil behavior of this super creepy guy. He was apparently going beyond his contracted hours. He was going to places multiple times a day. He was taking tasks, always in the mortuaries, that were not necessary. And he was lying about what he was doing because he had chronic back problems, so he could not carry out some of the work that he claimed to do. The police raided his home, and they found that he had taken photographs as well as video footage of himself conducting these acts. And I think this will be surprising because quite a few of us outside of the United Kingdom have not heard of this guy. I mean, have you heard of him before, David Fuller?
No, he went to trial in 2021 and never heard of this guy. Seems like we would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
is it shocking to think that like this is not newsworthy enough in this day and age?
I don't think it's that. I think it was.
What is it? I'm confused.
It's what, Ben, you said the investigation just concluded, right? There was a trial and then investigation.
Yes. So the trial pertained to the charges of murder. And so he was sentenced to life in prison for the murders and degradation of two people. The inquiry comes, like pretty much every sexual abuse case in the United Kingdom, the inquiry comes well after the fact, right? The inquiry arrives as this guy is already locked up. He's no longer committing these evil, heinous acts. But I ask you, and I ask this in good faith, it's not a rhetorical question. Is this indicative of a larger pattern in the United Kingdom? I mean, in the notes I shared, I called it Shadows of Savile, and we know what that refers to, right?
Jimmy Savile, the children's talk show host, I guess, who was a serial pedophile, right?
And necrophiliac.
Yeah, necrophiliac. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but okay, so do we know if he was abusing people before they were dead? Like in other, I guess what I had read about him is that he was working in that morgue and desecrating the bodies that were found in the morgue between ages of 9 and 100.
Yes, and over 100 people. We know that. So in 2021, when he gets convicted of the murders of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce, he had committed those murders over a series of months in 1987. And it seems exceedingly rare, unfortunately, that a creature of this ilk would commit 2 sexual assaults and murders and then just stop. You know, I mean, sure, you can see a window of time where there's sort of a where they sort of go into a torpor, like Dennis Radar, aka BTK killer, but they usually come back. So unfortunately, and we don't have solid proof for this, but unfortunately, it is highly likely that there were more things. A lot of these individuals build up to the murders. So we know this guy had a history of antisocial behavior that he kept under wraps. He had a criminal record for burglary, I think, or robbery. But it is, if the precedent of these sorts of behaviors, if it can be applied to this guy, then it is almost certain that he probably sexually assaulted people earlier. Now, what's the primary difference? He is, as far as we know, not plugged into the higher-ups, the posh, the aristocratic network that touched law enforcement and kept people like Cyril Smith and Jimmy Savile away from the consequences of their horrific crimes.
This gets me thinking back to a conversation I had with my my partner not terribly long ago about how, you know, oftentimes folks that commit these kinds of crimes were themselves victims of horrific acts of sexual violence, you know, from a very, very early age. And it just, you know, to the point where it just skews their psyches, you know, absolutely beyond repair, especially if these things are never reported and there's never any intervention and stuff like that. Do you think cases like this are a psychological, psychiatric issue or a criminal issue? Or both, or like what? Where is the line? I'm fascinated by this. I don't have an answer. I'm interested in what you guys think, and also what you listeners out there think.
¿Por qué no los dos? You know what I mean? You can be both. You can have severe mental illness or a cognitive condition and still be very much aware that what you are doing is a crime. So I would imagine that most of us fellow conspiracy realists tuning in this evening, can agree that the act of something like necrophilia is indicative of some sort of mental aberration. However, the question then becomes, how does a society deal with things like this, right? Is it like the old adage about how when you catch one bug or one rat, there are multiple other ones out there in the same area? You know what this reminded me of? I can't remember which of us did it, but there were a couple stories in the past about abuse of dead bodies in funeral homes in Georgia. And they weren't doing the same sort of evil things, but they were putting them in mass graves, like out in the woods and stuff.
That's a grift, though.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to make money and not have to actually invest in the right things that would be what they were being paid for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it goes back to the commonality. Then is that it goes back to this series of assumptions that we seem to make in society about the protection of those who have passed on or their remains. I mean, like, shouldn't there? I just sort of assumed that there were security and cameras in these environments, in these institutions. How on earth does someone get away with doing this kind of unclean, vile for a decade and a half?
Inside job access.
I mean, you got to think about when they searched his home, they found 800,000 images, right?
Jesus.
They were taken inside those morgues with him doing stuff.
818,000.
That's insane. I thought you were about to say, nah, man, you're tripping. Wow.
And 500 individual videos where, again, it's him doing acts to dead bodies in these places where there is no camera. But I think about, why would you need a camera in the room where the dead bodies are? Most of them that are inside, like the, what is the correct nomenclature?
The drawers, the things. Yeah, the old joke is they're not going anywhere,
Yeah.
But like, I guess I don't know why you would imagine the need for that security measure, right? Until you discover somebody like this guy and you're like, well, now we're going to put cameras in every single one.
Yeah, another thing too is that the United Kingdom is one of the most heavily surveilled populations in the world in terms of deployment of closed circuit television cameras. Like, they have CCTV everywhere. We talked about this in previous episodes. And look, maybe this is one horrific, egregious thing that does not illustrate a pattern. But I ask you, and I put this in the notes too, like, think about things like the UK just has a terrible track record when it comes to these things. And yes, the names of the powerful people or the names of the monsters doing the most egregious crimes, those always hit the headlines. But what about stuff like Operation U-Tree? What about the fact that over and over, law enforcement fails to do its job and then has someone comment, oh, we should have an inquiry. And then the inquiry says, far after the fact, that there was some kind of negligence to the point of itself being criminal. But how far can this sort of pattern continue before the old chestnut of they called it a persistent lack of curiosity on the part of authorities? How long can that excuse or rationalization hold? What else is out there? It's scary, scary stuff.
It is weird, man, because theoretically he was doing his job, right? Isn't that the thing that he was just going down to the morgue to perform job duties or something?
Yeah, but off the clock, outside of working hours.
That's the problem.
There's a line where he was visiting up to 444 times a year.
Jeez.
So multiple times a day. At least
what you doing? What you doing down there?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's all it would take.
And how many people had the break room conversation where they were like, damn, that Dave guy he gives me the icks,
Yeah.
Now I'm going to sound like I'm being a necrophiliac apologist, but like, do we know of any other acts, any potential going further than that and making the dead bodies himself?
Well, he did it twice in the 80s, right? And what Ben, I think I totally agree with what you're saying. somebody kills another human in 1987 and they're just now in 2021 getting in trouble for that.
There's things that happened in the interim is what you're saying.
Well,
I mean, likely. I'm sorry I missed that. No, I feel like a dum-dum. No, and I would say that's where my mind goes. They're just now finding that out. What's the stuff they didn't find? Where are the other bodies buried, you know?
Exactly. In one of, again, the most surveilled populations on the planet. So is it a matter of a persistent lack of curiosity, which is just a nicer way of saying willful blindness and looking the other way? How come these people don't get caught until far after the fact? This is a similar question we could apply to institutions like the Catholic Church or indeed the Boy Scouts of America. And again, we're not, of course, obviously, we're not saying every priest is terrible. We're not saying every scoutmaster is a monster. But in the United Kingdom specifically, a lot of people seem to be getting away with a lot of very, very obscene, unclean atrocities. Like they're atrocities. And the health minister attempted to make a proactive statement and said Maria Caulfield apologized on behalf of the entirety of the UK government and the National Health Service, or NHS, and said that this report has made for, it's part of a 2-part independent inquiry. They said this report has made for, quote, harrowing reading, and that lessons will be learnt, and that no family has to go through this experience again. Nice words, pretty words. They sound sincere, but how would you feel knowing this pattern if you lived in this place? Can they really say no family has to go through this again? Do you really want to hear someone say lessons were learned, mistakes were made?
How do you even quantify that kind of assurance?
Exactly.
You just can't. You just can't, especially when it's gone on for so long. I think you're kind of done. Your credibility is sunk at that point, right?
Mm-hmm. And you can read much more about this stuff that we are not going into detail in on the show. You can find full information about this. Also, we should say David Fuller is a pretty common name in the Anglosphere. So it's so make
That's
sure
a good point. That's
you're
a
looking
bummer.
for the I always think that whenever I read the story about one of these monsters and I think they have a common name, I'm always thinking like, oh gosh.
Yeah, like Adolf in Germany.
Exactly.
I'm sure it was
Or
mega
Benedict.
popular for a time.
Yeah,
Yes, right.
yeah, right. Or Pol Pot. Actually, that was his street name. I think we mentioned this previously. Do you guys know Pol Pot's real name, like his Boer name? I kid you not. Salith Sar. How Sith Lord does that sound?
Oh,
Salith Sar.
Arguably creepier than Pol Pot.
I would say it's objectively creepier than Pol Pot.
Maybe he changed it because he needed to soften his image a little bit.
Right. It's very...
At least optically, you know what I mean? Like on paper.
And then because he failed at those optics, he committed mass murder on people who wore glasses. That is part of the true story, the killing fields. Yeah, we're going to call it here. We want to know, especially if you live in the United Kingdom, we want you to let us know if you do see a pattern of maybe not cover-ups, but maybe some sort of willful negligence or criminal mishandling.
Mischief?
Criminal mischief. There we go. Callbacks. As always, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back later this week. We've got some fantastic messages from you. If you want to join the show, tell us your thoughts. We can't wait to hear from you. We try to be easy to find in any number of places.
Correct. We are Conspiracy Stuff on Facebook, X, nay, Twitter, and YouTube. Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram and TikTok.
We have a voicemail. The number is 1-833-STDWYTK. You've got 3 minutes when you call in. Say whatever you want. Just make sure to give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use that name and your message on the air. It's that easy. If you want to send us links, attachments, don't send attachments. Maybe one.
Pics, unsolicited or otherwise. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
We're not supposed to open them according to company policy, but
It's true.
Whatever. Send it our way. Send it our way via email. We are
Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.